some more.
Yo, what's good, people? Izzy Max here, back again with some more MDL content, and I am joined with the boy, Ryan.
Hey, what's going on? I really like these Pokemon on the front. They're
they serve
very
no purpose.
Relevant. They're relevant to the league.
They serve no purpose, man.
I love Snowbama and my little Ice Boy there.
Anyway, like promised, this is going to be the power rankings. This is going to be the longer one. Tomorrow, you guys should see the weekly breakdown. Not going to be as long since we are doing the power rankings every 3-ish weeks. But schedules are tight, so we are going to say ahead of time. One of the matches haven't been played yet, but we'll get to it. So without further ado, do you have any words before we start?
Yeah, these power rankings were very difficult. We don't have a lot of data to go on still.
Yeah, three match sample size is not really enough to validate.
We'll talk about it a little more in depth once we get to differential, but I do want to say off the bat, differential is not the primary factor here.
No, it's more who you played, how you played, and like what happened.
Yeah, so let's move on.
Okay, first off, we do have the initial. These are what happened in the first MDL video you guys saw. This is where the collective whole ranked everybody. And this is going to be another point that I say me and Ryan's, I guess, initial power rankings are definitely different than what you see here.
Yeah.
Since this was a collective
they're pretty
whole.
similar. But
yes.
Yeah, there are some changes.
Like, for me, John and C-Rad are a lot higher than what they show here for my initial rankings, and I think same with Ryan's, I do believe.
Yeah, I think I had Charles ranked one higher, and then C-Rad, and then I had Jizzy was ranked higher on mine, and so was JohnBoy, I believe.
Yeah. So without further ado, these are all subjective to me and Ryan. We have kind of came to a collective agreement on pretty much most of these.
Yes.
But this is where everybody started as a collective whole based on the league.
Yeah, and we're going to have, in parentheses, we have written down the initial rankings that all the coaches agreed on. Next to each judge, we're going to talk about the initial ranking, how they moved, that sort of thing.
Right. And this is where the league stands currently. This plays a role in what we ranked, but not incredibly.
No. We're only 3 games in, and differential is definitely in this setting because you can lose 8-0 to, like, you can lose an 8-0, or it can be like a really tight game where you just gain 1 differential. So with only 3 games to go on, differential is really, really difficult to take with a ton of credibility, especially because the severity and difficulty of some schedules were not equal to others,
right?
Which we will talk about.
Yep. So first off, at the bottom 2 slots is one of the matches that haven't been played. Nin and Jizzy still need to play. They are respectively ranked 11th and 12th. So basically what we're saying is the winner of this match goes to 11th, the loser goes to 12th. So just leading things off, let's go ahead and talk about Nin blocks first.
Yeah.
I do feel like he's new to the VGC scene. Based on how he played against Toxic, we didn't get to see the match, but we've seen the numbers. He kind of held his own. Against Tay, I didn't feel like he had a really positive matchup at all. The Wheezing Bring showed me that he understood like how to counter Tay's team. So I do have confidence that he'll at least pick up a couple wins. But yeah, I feel like he's a little too either new or unfamiliar with the VGC scene, but I feel like he is growing into it.
Yeah, Nin has really shown a lot of improvement. I've been pretty impressed. If he gets a really strong victory over Jizzy, he definitely, whoever wins that game will take the 11th slot. I don't know why it's saying win-loss is 0-3 there. It should say 0-2. That might be an editing error. For some reason, we think a ghost came on when we were editing.
Yeah, because Jizzy's doesn't say anything. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. So there was a ghost that came over these 2 slides. We were actually discussing that. We were like, who put this stuff there? Because it wasn't true. Yeah. Anyway, so Nin definitely has been improving. His close to Diversion transaction was really nice. I think that's going to play off really well for him in the near future.
Especially with that Weavile.
Yeah, the Wheezing has done some good work, has shown itself to be really good. Just overall, like, I think familiarity with this format's going to be good. I think that if Nin is watching what the other coaches are doing, I think he can definitely pull some wins. His team has some really unique strats available to it that are a little higher level that I think he's going to need to do some research into exploring. But I think there's a lot of potential here for Nin.
And that's another thing, like you said, I do think his team kind of gives him a steeper of a learning curve because based on what he drafted one hell of a singles team.
Yeah. And there are good double strategies.
Yeah, I just think that comes from inexperience.
Yeah, it's a difficult team to work with, but I definitely think it has that potential.
Okay, moving on to, again, the 11th or 12th spot, depending, is Jizzy.
Yep.
I honestly think he's underperforming. I really do.
I'm inclined to agree.
Based on his team, he should be doing way better than a -5 and a -4.
Yeah, and I actually think a lot of that comes down to how he has been bringing his team. Jizzy has been bringing the same 6 mons every week. And the sets are good, but they're not
optimized.
They're not optimized. They're what you would expect. And I think that's really weighing down the team. On paper, Jizzy has, I think, one of the top teams in the league.
His synergies are so good.
Yeah, there's so many good synergies, but you can fake out leads with the Zoroark, which I haven't seen. The Zoroark has always felt like it doesn't ever feel like it's being used right to me. You have him on like Durant, which is a huge threat.
Yeah. With a follow me user.
With a follow me user, and you're not bringing that and using it. You're not using your Talonflame. Jizzy can set priority Tailwind, Dynamax Azumarill, and then just do damage with like a Life Orb, a huge power of Azumarill. Like, that is an incredibly good strat that he just hasn't brought yet. That's to me seems very obvious. Like, I would do that against Toxic's team, for example.
Right.
That would have rolled through a lot of what Toxic ended up bringing that match, which is of course hindsight 2020. But
and then
to me it says he's not utilizing his mons to the full potential that they really have.
Right. And then back to what I said at the beginning, how they play, I think, plays a role in where we place these people, because I feel like if Jizzy would have just maxed the huge power Passimian, he would have won that game.
I agree.
So that kind of, yeah. His transaction makes sense, I guess, in the long...
Hasn't come up yet.
It hasn't come up yet, but it makes sense why he did it, because he did draft the Tauros, so it does give the Tauros more than just an Intimidate user as a factor.
Yeah.
But like you said, we have yet to see it, so...
Yeah, it gets Taunt, Icy Wind. I mean, Frost and Destiny Bond. Frostlass is definitely a good support mon. We just haven't really seen it utilized yet, which is also something I think you'll notice with some of the lower placed trainers outside of Nin blocks, is some of them are making transactions that aren't really appearing or showing up.
Right. So next up we have Dark King. On paper, he had the hardest first 3 games.
Yeah, him and Brock, which we'll get to Brock at later, had definitely the hardest schedules. And the other thing with Dark King is he hasn't played anyone he is on paper supposed to beat.
Nope.
He played the initial 1st, 7th, and 3rd players, which doesn't rank. So we can't really say, oh, he should have won those games. And I think he also gets to keep 10th because his draft transactions have been very good. The Kaparaja for the Fungus and the Serena for the Orbeetle, I think, are really good transactions. Is showing a lot of better skill and prep. I think Dark King is mostly having issues that boil down to he's fixing his team composition, but it's been a lot of matchups that he doesn't have a positive matchup. He definitely actually does hit some of the teams in this league very hard, I think. I also just think that he might not always be building the right sets on a given week.
For sure.
I feel like there's against you, I feel like he did the right sets. Against Hubbub, I feel like that those were not the right sets to bring, and I don't recall his game with Hunter off the top of my head, but
it was the leader of the talk for that week's breakdown was momentum and transitions.
Yeah, so
I have high hopes. I think he will definitely be in a playoff race.
Yes, I agree.
So I don't see him ending down here. Like we said, he has played the hardest 3 games
hard
out of
schedule, and we can't move him.
No.
He hasn't gotten a chance to really show off yet,
Mm-hmm.
and he hasn't played anybody that really gives us a fair grip of him as a player and his team. So
Right. All right. Controversy time. Toxic. We are placing in the ninth slot. We had a collective agreement on this. So why don't you go ahead and start?
So Toxic did drop 3 ranks, which might come as a bit of a surprise because his differential is actually pretty good, and he has won 2 games. That said, he won his 2 games against the bottom 2 slots, and he lost to the person who was directly under him in a huge loss. 7. He lost by a 7. The asterisk there because of the DC, but even still, that's a pretty big loss. And frankly, the play we've seen from Toxic
is a lot like Jizzy's.
It's a lot like Jizzy's, and it isn't bad. But when you consider the next 4 people that are coming after Toxic, you're gonna see why that momentum has kind of shifted and why we placed him here. And the other thing is that frankly, Toxic has made trades, but they haven't really come to
fruition yet.
Yeah, so obviously we're only on week 3, but Toxic has had a pretty bad case too, where Jizzy does, where you bring in those same mons, and the trades on paper didn't make a lot of sense, and we're not seeing them. So because we're not seeing these trades, we don't really have a good understanding of if they have that potential. Rotom Heat for Lilligant would have been great if you had Torkoal, because then you could do After Me with the Lilligant with the Chlorophyll boost and Click Eruption. It's a great strat that people do, but Lilligant really isn't serving a whole lot of use on a sand team off the bat, and there were other grass types available if he was really looking for a grass type.
For sure.
There were other electric types that could have filled that slot if you really didn't, because the Rotom Heat wasn't doing a lot either.
No, because he has Charizard.
In the Hydreigon for Kommo-o, we talked about that kind of at length with the last video, but to summarize, Hydreigon was at least a powerful offensive threat. It was also a special threat, which he doesn't have a ton of special attackers.
No.
So it would have been really nice to have Hydreigon there as a nice special attacker. He swapped it for Kommo-o, which could work out because Kommo-o is a really good Pokemon, but he doesn't have a Follow Me user, so he can't Klingriss Soul Boost, which is kind of the standard Kommo-o doubles set, is you use your Klingriss Soul, you Follow Me, and you do that. So what I'm getting at is that he has 2 mons that have potential. Lilligant and Kommo-o both have potential, but the traditional strats aren't there, and I don't see what the untraditional strats are at a glance.
Right.
And we haven't seen them come to games. So yeah, part of it is just that the game sense. He could have, if Jizzy had maxed in his game, he probably would have lost to Jizzy. And his win against Jizzy was not a huge margin. And that's 11th place, and his loss against C-Red was a huge margin, which is a pretty big deal.
Yes.
So,
and when we were talking about resistance with Dark King, Toxic had the easiest schedule.
Yeah, Toxic had one of the easier schedules. He had to play he only played people that were below him on the initial ranking list, and only one person who was close to him, and it was kind of a blowout loss. So we can see, I think Toxic could move up. I think he'll probably be a contender for playoffs race. But I could also see Toxic moving down if he really doesn't start to figure his sets out, kind of get his game together.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Hunter, my pick. Well, this was my dark horse pick. He's not playing bad.
Hunter's doing pretty well.
Real quick. You do see the loss to JohnBoyz. This is one where it matters a little bit less that he was initially ranked higher, because me as my vote, JohnBoyz was actually ranked higher than Hunter initially.
Yeah, I think I was the same way. And also, Hunter has been playing. He's been playing very well. All 3 games he's had, his win against Dark King was very good. His loss against Johnny was a pretty close match, and his game against Tay was pretty solid overall.
It really was.
He's been making good transactions. He's been playing really well. Definitely think he's in line with the other 3, where he'll be racing for playoffs. However, I think that he's showing that he is probably the most likely of those 3 to have a pretty more secure slot, I think.
Agreed.
And I think, too, we haven't really gotten a good sense of Hunter as a player. He's played the 9th and 10th. He lost to the 9th, but we'll get to the former 9th in a second, who we both ranked higher initially anyway.
Way higher, yeah.
Yeah, he beat the 10th player, which is he should on paper, and he had a fairly close game with 4th place, which is actually pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So, especially considering the matchup was really not in his favor against Tay. So, overall, Hunter's doing really well. I would expect to see his ranking rise. He could potentially stay fairly static here, or he could go down a little bit, depending. But he's definitely one to keep your eye on. I think his Dark Horse rating that you gave him still stands.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on.
All right, this is where we started getting weird. For the next 4 slots, they are ranked 4 through 7th.
Yes, because these players are
kind of in a love triangle.
Yeah, it's borderline impossible to know what we need to do with them.
So Brock is your pick. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Brock was my Dark Horse pick. So far he has done the Dark Horse thing where you were ranked in 1st place and he won against you, which is like the biggest Dark Horse win of all time. But he's also lost to Hubbub and Matt, and he had a fairly large loss against Matt. His game with Hubbub was pretty close, so there's that to consider. He's been playing pretty well. The biggest issue is that Brock had the hardest schedule. So even though his differential is pretty low right now,
1, 2, 3.
He played 1, 2, and 3 in the league, and he's ranked 5th, and he still managed to win.
Yeah.
Which I think is telling, and he had a really good game with 3rd place. The problem is that because he's played 1, 2, and 3 so early, Brock can't move up as much. He can potentially win a lot of games against people who are currently kind of ranked with him in this 4 through 7 slot, and maybe beat Tay theoretically, and then he could kind of move up and maybe get like 3rd place, maybe 2nd. But he can't really at this point feasibly get 1st place. He's had a really good transaction with Espeon for Driftblim. His team is built very, very solidly. It's got a lot of tools and a lot of things to be afraid of. We can't Yeah.
I know this is an unpopular, I guess, point that I'm about to make, but the Driftblim pick definitely counter-picked me. Yeah. And my Ditto didn't work. So yes, he did beat me. And I think if my Ditto was correct, the game would have been like a lot closer, which is kind of why the loss against Matt kind of put him back down in this pool, because we still haven't really got to see him play through a transition. When we talk about transition, that is winning, losing, or losing, winning, continue to win in a best of 3. I wasn't able to do it because of things, Driftblim and all that, and then we didn't really get to see it with Matt because he forgot to click submit, which does happen.
Game 1, which does happen, and
that's more of a personal mistake than anything.
Yeah,
but yes,
that's a stressful matchup anyway.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of get to that later. I know it's a little weird considering differential, but you have to consider that Brock literally had the hardest schedule. And he could even be in 7th place, or he could be in 4th place.
Well, the thing is, even if he lost to me, I still think he's in the top 6 or 7 because he had the hardest first 3 games.
We can't, similar to Dark King, we can't really move him. We don't have enough information to go off of. I have faith, though, that Brock is going to do pretty well the rest of the season.
No doubt he'll make playoffs.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident he'll make playoffs and really perform well, so...
Okay, next up we have C-Rad, who I now wish I would have picked for a Dark Horse. This man is playing out of his mind.
Yeah, oh my gosh. C-Rad has been really bringing the heat. And keep in mind, too, where this Brock C-Rad, the next progression, they could be anywhere on these slots. His initial ranking was 8th.
These next 4 have no placement other than 4th through 7th.
Yeah, and C-Rad definitely at least moves up from 8th to 7th, so at the very least he's moving up. In differential, he's doing really well right now. He lost to Tay, which was an expected loss, but it was a pretty close game, and he brought a lot of really good techs. His game against JohnBoyz was crazy.
He played really, really well.
It was insanity. It was such good sets, such creativity, and similarly with Toxic, he really had a dominating win over Toxic with a really solid play. C-Rad's transactions have been, I think, some of the best in the league. Lantern for Slowking was a great transaction. Jolteon for Hitmonlee was a fantastic transaction.
I was hoping to see the Hitmonlee in Toxic's game, but he just didn't bring it.
Yeah, which actually, I kind of liked that. It felt to me like a bait, which I appreciate that.
It was a flex, yeah.
Yeah, and he's playing so well. and he definitely, to me, feels like he could be moving into that upper, like
Top five.
like top 5, top 3. You know, he can potentially too get some big upset wins. C-Rad is definitely a player to look out for. We only have 3 games to go off of, but they've all been great showings, all 3. So he definitely deserves that slot. Then we have you. Yeah, you're bumping down. This is, I think, you and Toxic got hit the hardest. You were initially ranked first. You're currently in the 4-7 rank. So you had a pretty good win against Dark King. It was a clean set.
Yeah.
Then against Brock, you lost. The Ditto played some aspect in that, so that loss might have been closer, but
which is why I'm not. Which is why these rankings aren't 3 through 7; they're 4 through 7.
Right, and also Brock, to be fair, definitely still could have given you the loss. It probably would have been a closer loss.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely think that based on how the momentum of those games were going, even with Ditto, Brock still had a pretty good shot.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying it would have been closer.
Yeah, and then you had JohnBoy, which was a 1-0 loss. That was a really tight game.
Oh no, it wasn't even 1-0. It was a -1, -1.
-1, -1. I forgot about that. It was a beautiful match, but It did go in JohnBoy's favor. I think mostly what we're seeing here is that you got beat by a dark horse, and then JohnBoy, who was ranked lower than you, has also been steadily rising. Spoiler alert, he's the next person on the 4 through 7 ranking.
Yeah.
We had to drop you below a lot of the top echelon people, but it's really hard to say how far you should drop based on these 3 games. And considering who you lost to as well, that plays a huge role in where you're currently placed. Your transactions so far, I think, have been pretty good. I do know that you're planning some more transactions in the future. So yeah, I definitely think you'll probably end up either moving up. Again, I don't necessarily think you'll stay in this slot, but I could also see more surprise losses coming out. People are really getting a good, despite how many options you have, I've been really impressed by how both Brock and JohnBoy prepped for your team.
Yeah.
Proving that not only does that variety obviously matters, but they both found really good counterplay around your team.
A fast ghost type and water types. That's why I'm making my transactions.
Yeah, so it's been a really good season for you so far. I think that you'll probably end up picking up plenty more wins, but I also think potentially too you could pick up some more losses against the people that are coming up later in the list.
Granted, I do play Matt next week.
Yeah, which that's a big match. So.
Yep. I don't have anything to say. It's me.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We got JohnBoy. JohnBoy's been extremely impressive this season. I kind of want to talk about just what we're seeing. Similar to C-Rad, this man's playing out of his mind every week. Very creative stats.
The loss to Charles also puts him in this 4 through 7. If he didn't lose to Charles, he would definitely be in the top.
Yeah, if he didn't lose to Charles, he probably would have had a pretty solid fourth or third place. But probably, I think, 4th place actually. But regardless, he beat Hunter, who was ranked above him. He beat you, who was ranked first initially, and he lost to Charles, who was ranked 1 below him in a pretty solid set. So overall, he's running a pretty net positive this season. He's been playing extremely well. He's been bringing really creative, really well thought out sets. JohnBoyz actually sent me a few of his sets, and I've been wildly impressed at the kind of calcs he's doing and what he's looking for. He knows exactly what he wants week in and week out, and that's really important. His team's working really well for him. I think it was kind of underrated by the league as a whole, and actually even by you and I initially.
Yeah.
I think his team really has that potential to really take away games. I think he's definitely probably going to be a playoffs contender, along with a lot of these other 4 through 7 ranked people. And he is really, really just proving that he has the necessary skill to continue to move up in this league. I wouldn't be shocked to see JohnBoy potentially be the upset of the whole season.
The fact that he was able to draft Blastoise with his last pick is ridiculous.
Yeah, and the Licky Licky for Roserade, that Licky Licky set was insane, but the Roserade set he brought against you was also wildly crazy. And worked super well.
Scarf Worry Seed.
Scarf Worry Seed. It was mind-boggling. So keep an eye out on him. Really been impressed with his play. Really excited to see the rest of his season.
I will say, creativity doesn't always win you games. It can also lose you games. So,
which is, I think, how he lost to Charles, if I'm being completely honest with you.
I will agree. Yeah.
I think he lost to Charles because he was doing that. And we obviously value a lot of creativity, but there is a lot to be said for standard set bringing that's really well played. There's a reason the standards work, and we're going to come to that with, I think, the next person. So let's kind of talk about it.
Yeah, next
Tay
person
Breezy.
is Tay. It says... Oh, never mind. I read that wrong. Yes, his initial ranking was 4th. He moved up because he hasn't lost a game, but he has had one of the easier 3 games. Yeah.
Yeah, his schedule, not to say it's been easy. He did play 8th and 7th, but those were games he was supposed to win anyway. He's currently running the highest differential in the league. He's doing extremely well. This is by no means Tay. You could argue, I think we actually did argue for a bit about Tay potentially being in 2nd. The problem is we can't really justify moving him up until we see him play anyone that's in that 5th to 1st slot.
Right.
So just talking in general, Tay's a good example of what we were just talking about with JohnBoy, where Tay's sets have mostly been pretty traditional, but he's playing them so well.
Yes.
And he's really, really bringing the heat. His team has a lot of options. He's really, really been using them all really nicely. The Ludicolo was a massive transaction.
I was about to say, I want to make a point
team.
that he picked up Ludicolo, so he didn't bring it week 1. It already has 10 kills and 1 death.
Yeah, he has already been making just massive amounts of improvements to his team with that Ludicolo. I wouldn't be shocked to see him pick up another Rain Sweeper in the future. Tay's playing extremely well. I really don't have any complaints about what I've seen so far. It's just that we have a hard time ranking Tay in 2nd place or 1st place, despite his differential, simply because he hasn't played anyone in the top 5.
Well, and spoilers, Hub is next. The only loss she has was to the number 1 spot. So let's go ahead and jump into that.
And Hub has played extremely well. She hasn't made any transactions yet, which I actually think is fine for her team. It doesn't really feel like it needs a lot of transactions.
No.
Hub beat Brock in her game. It was a really close set. Really was a good showing by both players. But she did pull out a nice win in the end.
It was only a +1 instead of a +3 because she did suicide a Selgor twice. So
yeah. So there's that to consider, but it was a good set. Really good showing against Brock. Her loss against Matt is to be expected, but that said, she has the closest Matt game, I think, so far.
Yeah.
And it's still a good showing. And then she had a pretty nice commanding win over Dark King. So part of that is that Hubbub was ranked 3rd, Tay was ranked 3rd. Due to the fact that you dropped out, they both got bumped up 1. She lost to who she was supposed to. She had a good match against a top player, and she had a really clean match against a player that was kind of lower on the rung anyway. So to me, that just says that both Tay and her needed to just move up 1 slot.
Mm-hmm.
They both need more games. This power ranking list, like we've said multiple times,
small sample size.
We have a very small sample size to go off of, so that's part of the reason why 4 through 7 is ambiguous, is simply because we could not come to an agreement and we did not have enough information. However, we do feel pretty confidently about where we've placed these two, simply because that the sample size does indicate kind of initial predictions, and they're both playing really well.
Right. And then Matt, rank 1st. He's beat everybody he's played.
Yeah, Matt is currently 3-0. He's ranked 1st, and he has played 3rd and 5th and won pretty significantly with both.
Well, 2-0 is not significant.
2-0 is not super significant, but the Brock might have been slightly closer had he locked in his set, but even still, to me, the 1st place was really cemented with Brock. Mostly because Matt has the most, like we even said this when we were doing our team breakdown on our initial power rankings, was that Matt has the most 2020 VGC team on the list.
Yeah, he has the most counterplay too.
But he has the most counterplay, and the other thing is that obviously he has plenty of creativity that we've seen. Against Jizzy, he had the Brutal Swing and the Scarf Chandelier. Against Hubbub, it was mostly pretty standard stuff, kind of what you'd expect. But then we get to Brock's game. And he not only counterplayed Brock unbelievably well and counterpicked Brock. He basically just said, here's exactly what Brock will do, and just counterplayed that. Like, perfectly to a T. The sets he brought were incredibly creative, incredibly good. The weakness policy, Togekiss with the Ice Shard Vanillix was genius. There was so much. What we're seeing from Matt is not only does he knows when to bring good sets, the good old standards, and he knows when to be creative. He realized against Jizzy that creativity would secure him a much easier win. He realized against Hubbub that he needed those more traditional sets to really pull a win. And against Brock, he realized that if he let Brock do the setups that Brock has available to him, that Brock might roll him. So he basically ran very creative sets that just completely counterplayed Brock.
He basically told Hall Lucha to stay on the bench.
Yeah, and he told Rillaboom to stay on the bench too.
Yeah.
He'd stop the two things that could really damage his team. And to me, that's just a testament to how incredibly good of a player Matt has already proven to be. I honestly think he's going to be extremely hard to dethrone from this first place slot. I wish best of luck to all players trying. But so far, outside of some potential upset wins in the 4 through 7 slot and Hubbub and Tay, I guess just Tay at this point, I don't see him losing a whole lot of matches. I think the match that you have with him next week will be extremely important. Huge kudos to Matt. He's been playing extremely, extremely well, and I'm very excited to see what else he brings the rest of the season. Really, he tied together everything we've talked about. The only thing I have to say is Matt hasn't done any transactions yet, which obviously hasn't hurt him any. But yeah, he could take a few.
Yeah, there are definitely a few Mons on his team. One in particular that I see that it's just another Mon he has is doing the job that Mon should do better.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to say what it is because, of course, but
yeah, so
you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Overall, though, just wow. Matt's been playing out of his mind so well. Really just showing a strong... He's just also, to me, has shown the best game feel knowledge of any of the players so far. He makes the right reads the most consistently that I've seen.
In terms of knowledge, I think it's me and him at the top. Because I think everybody else is either relatively new or just played casually.
Yeah, so kudos to him. I'm excited to see the rest of his season. And we can kind of close out here just kind of talking about the next power rankings, what those will look like. And
they'll definitely be more cemented.
Yes.
After week 6, which is, of course, after the halfway point since there's only 11 weeks, we will definitely probably know who's going to be making playoffs by that point. And
we can have a good prediction.
Yeah. We'll probably have the first 3 or 4 slots, probably for sure in the playoffs. We'll know who has to pick up a couple wins to make it, and then we'll know who's really, really fighting for the last probably 2 slots, if I had to guess from what's going on right now.
Yeah. And another thing about those power rankings, Differential did not play a huge map role in this one due to different variety of schedules. In the next one, Differential is going to be a huge factor.
Yeah.
It got kind of ignored this time because we're still fairly early in the season and because schedules differed in variety of difficulty, but there is really not a whole lot of that for the rest of the season. And we can pretty confidently just use Differential. We might also reference back to the power rankings we assigned here as well, to help guide that a little bit. But overall, those power rankings are going to be a lot more cemented, a lot more
thorough.
This is just because we have enough data that we can kind of start to notice trends and observations. But this is kind of like scientists basically doing their hypothesis. We gotta get into the research phase on week 6 and really kind of dig in.
For sure.
So thanks for having me on. Yeah. This was an extremely hard list to make. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we sat down for a good 3 or 4 days deciding what we would do if someone beat someone, how that would affect, and all that junk. But
this was a really tough list to make. So we do hope that everyone understands where we're coming from with it. We think it's pretty fair to all the coaches, and we're very excited to see the rest of the season.
For sure.
thanks for having me on.
No problem.
And I think that's all we got going on today.
Yep. All right. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.